I'm hoping that everything's working out there and Stephen White is visible as an inset to... Thank you, Stephen. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up.
I can hear you, yeah.
Lovely, lovely. We have transmission to the wider world. Excellent. Apologies for all those people who tried to tune in for a Collins education session. Gremlins got involved and I pressed the wrong button along the way to perfection, and perfection didn't happen. So right now I've left things running as they are. I'm not going to touch a thing except the slide forward button. So you'll enjoy Stephen's face in the top right hand of the screen there, and Stephen will join us later during the general meeting. So partial success. During testing I had my own face appearing in the corner there, but that's fine. We'll leave Stephen because he's prettier than I am. So anyway, welcome to the Braggs Theatre. I trust you've all had time to read our note here about COVID safety. And of course, for those in the audience here, please put your phones on silent. For those in the audience here, this is the Braggs Theatre. In case of an emergency, it's going through the doors you came in at the back, or you can go through the doors on your right down the bottom here, and they'll also take you to the exits. Of course, toilets are also through the door on your right. You go to the very back of the building, turn left, and make sure you come back through the correct doors on the way back. There's a couple of similar looking doors. So everyone, welcome to our monthly meeting. Our mission is to observe, understand, share and enjoy the wonders of the universe. We encourage visitors to join. Just can I have a show of hands of visitors here in the Braggs tonight? Who is visiting, who is not a member? 1, 2. Okay, well, welcome to our meeting. We trust you find it worthwhile and consider joining. The Astronomical Society of South Australia acknowledges and pays our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land, sky and cultural beliefs. So tonight's presentation will commence shortly, followed by some announcements and upcoming events. But today being our December meeting, Constitution says we have an AGM. It'll be a short AGM, after which we close for supper. So, ladies and gentlemen, Fraser has left me with a slide that I recall from the TV days of analogue presentation. I'm not quite sure why this slide is here, but I'm sure Fraser will explain. Now, for those of you who don't know Fraser, and I can't imagine many of you don't know him, he's quite a forthright character and is very good at what he does. And tonight he's going to be very good at talking about eclipses. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome ASA's own eclipse specialist for the coming sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, Fraser Farrell.
I can use one of these. Yep. Yes, and to explain this slide, you see when you go around the place using other people's projectors, you frequently find that they may not work, they may not be lined up, your laptop won't talk to them, etc., etc. And so I always start every one of my presentations with a test pattern. Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's good enough. Well, it looks really nice on my screen here. All right, so which was the forward button here, Jerry? Oh, okay, very good. Okay. I called the talk 5 in 15 years because Australia is currently in a rather unusual bit of astronomical history where we have 5 total solar eclipses in Australia in a 15-year period. And this is pretty unusual, people. The next time any country has anything this good is over 100 years from now, and it's Canada, and they only get 4 total solar eclipses in a similar amount of time. And yeah, that photo you see there is actually courtesy of the late Fred Espinac, Mr. Eclipse himself. That's of the April 2023 eclipse in Exmouth. He was on the big boat with us and took that very nice photo. And if you're wondering about the fleuriostars.au, that's one of my other retirement projects. I'm running multicultural night sky tours down in the Fleurieu Peninsula, just part-time. Okay, let's get into it. I've got a lot of slides and Jerry's really keen to get this AGM underway a bit later, hopefully before midnight. Okay, quick summary for those of you who don't know how eclipses work. Basically, solar eclipses is the moon's shadow falling upon the Earth. They can only happen at a new moon. And a lunar eclipse is when the Earth's shadow falls upon the moon, and it can only happen during a full moon. And don't let anybody try to convince you otherwise. We do unfortunately live in an age of increasing online social media bullshit, and people post all sorts of stories about how scientific things actually work. It's rather sad, really. All right, now we don't get eclipses every new or full moon. Short answer is the moon's orbit is inclined about 5 degrees to the Earth's orbit. Also, the plane of the moon's orbit also precesses, wobbles. The moon's ellipse changes shape slightly from month to month. Actually, tracking the moon's orbit is one of the most complex problems in celestial mechanics. And it took hundreds of years for astronomers to fully figure it out. But we're lucky these days. Now, with lunar eclipses, we're pretty fortunate for two reasons. One is the Earth's shadow is a lot bigger than the moon is. And also, when you get a lunar eclipse, half of the Earth can see it simultaneously. So chances are you guys have already seen a few lunar eclipses during your lives, even without leaving home. I mean, Adelaide gets 46 of them this century alone, plus partial lunar eclipses. And to give you a view, this was the one that happened about 3 months ago. The eclipse visibility area encompasses countries like India, China, Pakistan, Indonesia. I reckon there's about 3 to 4 billion people in that zone of visibility. And yeah, it turned out it was rather a nice eclipse. This is a diagram I stuck in our local newspaper to explain to people how the moon would appear in relation to the Earth's shadow. And yes, I actually got outside and took some photos of it. And despite them being interrupted a lot by clouds, I did get a few. This is the partial stage of the eclipse. You'll notice that the Earth's shadow is curved. The curvature is a lot bigger than the moon is. And also it's a bit blurry. It's because the Earth has an atmosphere. And yeah, this photo was just taken with a mobile phone camera looking through a telescope. So nothing particularly elaborate. And if you play around a bit with your exposures, you can get some very nice colours. Yeah. And this was my attempt at making one of those photo sequences where it shows the moon moving into the Earth's shadow and through it and out the other side. Unfortunately, the clouds had other ideas, and I only got one right at the beginning, one a few minutes after the end, and a few in between, and that was it. Yeah, a bit frustrating. Anyway. Now, you can ask yourself, what would it be like in a lunar eclipse if you were standing on the moon? Well, thanks to modern robotic spacecraft, we now have some nice pictures of that. The Blue Ghost lunar lander happened to be on the moon last March. They persuaded it to aim its camera back at the Earth during a lunar eclipse. And so, yeah, that's what a lunar eclipse looks like from the moon. It's actually a solar eclipse, technically speaking. Yeah. Yeah, anyone who drag out your phones and take a quick picture of that. That's the next few lunar eclipses visible from South Australia. The one in 2036, though, is not visible from Adelaide. You'll have to head over to Penong or Header Bight to see that one. And if you want to see the total part of it, you'll probably have to go to Perth. You'll notice we have a total lunar eclipse coming up next March at a rather convenient time of the evening. Now, those are standard times, and I think in March we're still on daylight saving, so plus 1 hour. But yeah, very kid-friendly. If I had to be babysitting my grandchildren that night, I'd probably drag them out. Have a look. Okay. Now, whereas solar eclipses are a lot rarer. I mean, the moon's a lot smaller to start with, so its shadow upon the Earth is rather small compared to the size of the Earth. So there they are to scale. This is the March 2016 total solar eclipse that went over Indonesia. And there you go. There's the relative sizes of all the bodies involved. Unfortunately, Stephen's insert is sitting right over the image of the moon. If you look roughly above where Stephen's head is, that's about where the moon should be. Yep. Oh, there he is. He spaced it down. Okay. And also, the apparent sizes of the sun and the moon are both variable. The sun's size varies a bit because the Earth has an elliptical orbit. And the apparent size of the moon varies a lot more because the moon also has an elliptical orbit. And so sometimes the moon is big enough to cover the sun and we get a total eclipse. Other times it's not big enough to cover the sun and we get what's called an annular eclipse. So there you go. Yeah, total eclipse is when you get all the awesome wow stuff like solar coronas and unearthly lighting and the stars come out and you see planets and all that. Whereas with an annular eclipse, you just get, well, you still got a ring left of bright sunlight, so you don't see any of that other stuff. And to see a total eclipse, of course, you've got to be inside what we call the path of totality, where the moon's shadow goes over you. And if you're just outside the path, you see what's known as a beaded solar eclipse. And you have a look at that photo on the left. That's actually a beaded solar eclipse. And the guy who took that, now, it was November 2013. It's in Uganda. He's a professional African wildlife guide, and he's had to stay back at base camp to look after it while the rest of the guests went for a short drive to see the total eclipse. Now, this is a guy, he's never seen an eclipse before, but he's very good at photographing African wildlife handheld with a 400mm lens. And so this was his attempt to take a picture of maximum eclipse. Now, he did report when he took these photos, he couldn't see anything except the really bright bits on the left edge there and a very faint hint of the corona around the right. The rest of it only came out on his photos. We've worked out he was 1,100 metres outside the southern edge of the eclipse. So yeah, so close, so close. Now, of course, if you're in the path of total eclipse, you also get to see partial eclipses before and after. That's assuming you don't get interrupted by sunrise or sunset. And the easiest way to photograph the progress these days is just to take a series of images, regular intervals, chuck them into Photoshop or GIMP, make a poster like I did. And that's my sequence. Unfortunately, I was a bit stupid when I took this series. You know, my camera was perfectly capable of doing exposures at fixed time intervals, and I never used that feature. It was basically, I got a photo whenever I remember to press the button. So my actual photo sequence is very irregular, and I had to spend a while afterwards sorting them out. And the big picture in the middle is actually the end of total eclipse, where the sun's just coming out. That's a phenomena we call the diamond ring effect. And I have to admit, I totally fluked that one. I just happened to press the button at the right split second to catch it. Sheer ass, yeah. I can't claim real credit for that one. Now, if you want to step up the difficulty a bit, you can do what Gerhard did back in 2002, where you put all of your eclipse images onto a single photo. And just to make it even more challenging, this was 2002. We were still using film cameras in those days. Now, for the younger members of the audience, you know, with film cameras, you didn't get instant feedback or review or anything like that. You actually had to wait several days, take your film back to a photo lab and have it developed, and then you discovered there was a problem with your pictures. You'll notice on this sequence, for example, the top right image is actually a bit out of line with all the others because Gerhard managed to kick his tripod between the first and second exposures. Now, these were taken at 4-minute intervals. All of the partial images were taken through a solar filter on the camera. Totality itself and the sunset were taken without the filter. And you were near Lake Everard, Jared, yeah. And you were telling me the other night you're actually planning to repeat this experiment with the same camera in 2028. That's provided the camera still works by then, or even if there's film available. Yeah. Okay. Incidentally, Gerhard had about 30 seconds of total eclipse at this point. So yeah, you really have to plan these sequences. And We have a bit of history here. The earliest known successful attempt to do an eclipse image sequence was actually done in Adelaide on a glass plate camera back in 1916. Yeah. And so that's the Australasian Photo Review report of this significant achievement. And that little image on the bottom right is Stellarium's idea of what the annular solar eclipse looked like that day. And actually, as it turned out, 30th of July, you'd think, yeah, very likely to be cloudy. No, according to contemporary news reports, it was actually a sunny day over most of South Australia. You know, everyone in Adelaide saw it. It was viewed from Victor Harbour, most of the mid-north. There were reports from Narracourt. It's quite interesting reading the old newspapers. Yeah, everyone had a wonderful time. Unfortunately, most of them chose to view it with what we know as a really unsafe method. You know, hold a piece of glass over a candle till it collects a lot of soot and then use that as a filter. It's actually very dangerous doing that. And of course, if you're going to plan your eclipse photo, you know, you do have to consider weather and clouds. And yeah, Channel 7 were rather unlucky in Ceduna in 2002. Most of their 33 seconds was blocked by that one little cloud. There were people just a few hundred metres away from them who saw the whole thing. And I might add, we had a similar experience in Trinity Beach in Queensland in 2012. That was a 2-minute eclipse in the morning. It's wet season. We got maybe, our longest uninterrupted view was maybe 10 seconds. And actually, my son was trying to take photos of that one. It was his second eclipse. He was determined to get a good picture. And when it did come out into that clear patch, he was too gobsmacked looking at the sight of a totally eclipsed sun. And it was just about to go back into the cloud again when he remembered to take the picture, which is why it's doing that peekaboo effect. Looks quite photogenic though. And if your cloud repellent works, like it did for Alex Cherney, who was further up the coast from where we were, you get an effect like that. It's actually rather a pretty photo, that one. Yeah. This leads on to how do you learn how to put yourself into the right spot? Now, predicting eclipses has a long and illustrious history, goes back thousands of years, many, many thousands of years. And the first step to making eclipses predictable was courtesy of several of the ancient civilizations and cultures who realised that the relative positions of the sun and the moon almost repeat after 223 lunar cycles. That's about 18 years and 11 and a bit days. Now, the ancient Greeks referred to it as the Saros period. And we do know that this period was discovered by the ancient Chinese, the Babylonians, who told the ancient Greeks about it. We know the ancient Indians knew about it, the Mayans, whoever built Stonehenge. I think that was the Celtic people. We also have strong suspicions it was also known by several of our Aboriginal groups within Australia. The Nat and Jetty come to mind. They have some artifacts that show the 223 items. Yeah. So some examples with the Saros. On the 14th of November 2012, well, it was a total eclipse up in North Queensland, but it was a partial solar eclipse in Hawker in the Flinders Ranges. And one Saros later, in the afternoon of the 25th of November 2030, there will be a total solar eclipse there. Things do work out better if you actually go for 3 Saros periods, so you get pretty much a full day interval in between. So it lines up on roughly the same longitude. Case in point, the 1976 eclipse was partially in Hawker, totally in Mount Gambier, and then 2030 it'll be the other way around. So that's 3 Saroses. And it also works for lunar eclipses. There's an example there. Now, this was the thing about the Saros was useful, but it wasn't perfect. And it was a case of it still didn't pacify people too much. See, a lot of cultures figured out that a solar eclipse was the moon covering the sun in some way. What really freaked them out, a lot of them out, was lunar eclipses, when a full moon would suddenly go dark and turn red and really faint, and that freaked a lot of them out. because many cultures did not understand that the Earth was an object that could cast a shadow. And so there are always these long and complex attempts to improve on predicting eclipses. And also, just to mess with everyone's heads, there's about 40 consecutive Saros periods in play at any given moment. So that's why we get eclipses more frequently than every 18 years and a bit. And also, the stakes were pretty high for a lot of the ancient astronomers. If they got it wrong, if they were lucky, they would just get executed. Right? If they were unlucky, that was often preceded by torture and then execution. Or sometimes they'd just be thrown to the angry and panicked, frightened mob to be torn to pieces. Yeah, so the stakes were really, really high. I mean, these days, it's easy. The worst I can expect is criticism. Yeah, Fraser doesn't know his sums. You know? I don't expect to be killed. And to give you a glimpse of just how seriously some cultures took it, we have this mysterious gadget, which was found in 1900 in an ancient Roman shipwreck that was later dated to about 80 BC. And when it was discovered, it was a lump of corroded bronze inside the remains of a wooden crate. And the divers who found it and the archaeologists who dived on the wreck shortly thereafter just collected it along with a whole bunch of ancient Greek pottery and amphoras and other things and took it off to the Athens Museum, where this lump of corroded bronze just sat on a museum shelf for 2 years and then broke in half, revealing all of these gears inside it. And in an archaeological sense, that was like a wow moment because nobody had any idea that the inventors of antiquity could produce gears this complicated. To give you an idea, that main gear wheel contains 223 teeth. It's tracking the Saros periods mechanically. Yeah. We still have no idea who invented this gadget. There's been a number of suggested names, among them Archimedes, but yeah, still a mystery at this stage. And there have been replicas built at various times to figure out how it might have worked. And yep, it did track the sun, moon, and the planets that were known to the Greeks. Although I read in a lot of the analyses, apparently it wasn't very good at predicting where Mars was. That was probably because the ancient Greeks thought everything went round in perfect circles rather than ellipses. Mars has a rather elliptical orbit. Anyhow, I'd like to think of the quest to accurately forecast the eclipses basically gave birth to modern astronomy. I mean, during the European Dark Ages, the Arabic civilizations were giving a good go. I mean, the late 14th century, we had that description from Ibn al-Shatir of how the moon moved. And then a few hundred years later, Isaac Newton came up with the idea of gravity and the laws of motion, and also had a go at analysing the moon's motions. And that led to, in the early 18th century, the first reasonably accurate map of a total solar eclipse, courtesy of Edmund Halley, yeah, the comet guy. And it does say on his map that it took place on the 22nd day of April, 1715, because back then England was still using the old Julian calendar. In our calendar, it's the 3rd of May. And you can see he didn't actually do too bad. Now, bear in mind, he had to calculate all of this by hand, and back then they didn't even know the precise shape and dimensions of England itself. They were still surveying that. So, did fairly well, though, I thought. And yes, it was seen from multiple places through England and Wales. Great excitement. And then in 1824, there was a German mathematician, Friedrich Bessel, came up with a more straightforward method to calculate eclipses. Now, Mr. Bessel, he never actually studied for a university degree. And so for a while there, his ideas and publications were dismissed by the academic fraternity within Germany and Europe because they said, yeah, the guy's unqualified. You know, he's not a professor of anything. He doesn't hold a doctorate. Now, it turns out he was mostly self-taught mathematical genius. When that was eventually realised, he started getting all sorts of honorary degrees bestowed upon him. And at that point, all of the professors were happy to talk to him then. Academic snobbery. And then an American astronomer, William Chauvenet, came up with an improved version in 1863. And if you want to read about Chauvenet's version, I refer you to the explanatory supplement to the Astronomical Almanac, where you can read pages and pages of it in incredible, intensive and tedious detail. I'd recommend you're going to need at least Year 12 maths for this one. And if you hadn't done Year 12 maths for 40 years like I have, yeah, it did take a bit of revision first before I understood all of it. But I won't go into it here, or this talk will be 10 times as long. The explanatory supplement also tells you how to calculate the Besselian elements just from known positions of the sun and the moon. And it also has a very detailed procedure on how to calculate eclipses for a specific point. And we'll get onto that. It becomes important in a moment, because if you want to know the precise positions of the sun and the moon, your best source these days are the Jet Propulsion Laboratory's digital ephemerides. There's been a bunch of these come out over the years, becoming ever more accurate. The one I've been using for my calculations is what's known as the Digital Ephemeris 430, which has an error in the position of the sun of about 10 metres, which is about the distance from me to Gerhard. That's the error in the position of the sun, and it's about 150 million k's away. The error in the position of the moon is about that. Yeah, for you people out the back, that's about 5 centimetres. Right, the very latest version of the digital ephemeris is the DE440. They didn't really do much to improve the moon and the sun. They actually did more on the Jupiter and Saturn and their satellites. But it did slightly improve the accuracy of the moon down to about that, about 2 centimetres. Yeah, practically there's no difference. Now, it used to be back in the day, doing your eclipse calculations by hand was incredibly tedious. I can remember trying to calculate the 1976 eclipse when I was starting high school, and it was really difficult. We didn't have electronic calculators then either, so it was all done by hand with logarithmic tables and other archaic methods. And yeah, we did have to walk uphill through snow both ways to school, fighting off the dinosaurs. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I'll go outside and yell at a cloud now if you like. Anyway, nowadays though, you can actually discover how to do an eclipse just by looking at other people's coding. You know, there's lots of online eclipse calculators freely available. You can look at the source code. You also do the same thing with a lot of planetarium programs, look at their source code if they're free. Stellarium is available for Windows, Linux and Macs, and even for mobile phones. And it can simulate views of an eclipse. This is the 2030 eclipse, by the way, which actually takes place in the head of Scorpius. So it's actually between two of the head stars. You've got Jupiter and Venus just above the eclipse, and Antares. So it should be a pretty good view. You'll have lots of bright things in your pictures. Yeah, Venus, incidentally, is almost on the far side of its orbit, so you'll be looking at the sunlit side. Yeah, Stellarium can also predict eclipses from a specific location. It has what it calls a conjunction search function. And if you really want to get carried away, the gold standard at the moment is David Herold's Occult program. Now, David's based in the ACT, amateur astronomer, and eclipse, bit of an eclipse nut and occultation guru. Also quite good at coding. I should point out, though, Occult has a frighteningly steep learning curve. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it is bloody brilliant at what it does. So, I took all of that free advice, code, spreadsheets, and made my own solar eclipse calculator as a spreadsheet. And the question I'm always asked is why a spreadsheet, not a custom program? Because, well, I'm really good at writing spreadsheet code, but I'm totally shit at writing programs. So for me, a spreadsheet was easy. Another reason for using a spreadsheet is you can do eclipse data for any number of specified locations up to your spreadsheet's memory limits. And after you've run all the calculations, you then export the whole thing to a mapping program as what it calls a raster layer or a text delimited layer. And you can use it to make very nice maps, like this one. This is the 2030 eclipse over the Flinders Ranges. Those contours are total eclipse durations in seconds. And outside of the eclipse path, I've got percentages of partial eclipse. All done with a mapping program. Yeah, this is way better than just using Besselian elements. To give you an idea what it took to produce that map, to do Australia in general, just to get the partial eclipse stuff, I did the calculations for 188,000 points across Australia and its territorial waters, so they're roughly 7 kilometres apart. So that does the partial eclipses. You don't need to take photos of this, it's actually all on my website, Eclipses AU. Now, for the actual path of the total eclipse for 2030, I did 146,000 points. They were spaced a lot closer, about 700 metres apart on average, except for the edges where I went down to 100 metres apart to get the exact edges. The 2028 eclipse, the path of total eclipse there took about 741,000 points, which on my old laptop actually took about 3 days to run that spreadsheet. Yeah, so if anyone's, giving away a laptop that's, less than 10 years old, yeah, I'll be very happy to have it. You don't need to remove anything off the hard drive because I'm just going to wipe it and put Linux on it. And I'm currently working on the 2028 eclipse, and I'm actually doing a special map for the Sydney region where I've got points 100 metres apart, and there's about 90,000 of those. So yeah, this is what we call raster mapping. This is a bit different from the traditional Besselian calculation where you just ended up with nice curves. Instead, you end up with thousands of points and then you do contours. And it's not just durations, you can also do your eclipse times. That's the 2030 eclipse coming ashore on the west coast. The centre line goes over Scale Bay. Smoky Bay is just outside the northern edge. It's literally walking distance. The other big bay there about halfway to the south edge, that's Venus Bay and Port Kenny. Also runs right over the top of Poochera, dinosaur ant capital of the world, and the Gawler Ranges and a bunch of other places within South Australia. And the other nice thing about it, you can also get down to incredible detail if you want to do your contours even closer. This is Wanaring in New South Wales in the corner country, which is very, very close to South Limit, as you can see, to the point where actually walking from one side of town to the other makes a measurable difference. Wanaring's official population, I think, is about 80 people. And another nice thing about mapping programs is you can suck in pre-existing maps. I was actually quite pleased with Parks SA. I did this map for them last year. Turns out the PDF maps they have of all their various national parks are geo-referenced. You can pull them straight into a mapping program. They'll land in the correct spot at the right scale and properly aligned. Brilliant. And then behind that one, I've got a whole bunch of topographic maps from the Lands Department. Again, geo-referenced. Just draw it all in the mapping program. You can get really, really detailed. And another aspect of this I've been doing, which I think is so far unique at this stage, is what I call the road graphs, where I do a whole bunch of points along a major road, calculate the eclipse circumstances for every single point, and then I can do a graph of any eclipse parameter. I mean, this is the total eclipse duration along the Flinders Ranges Way. So starting from the old Canica Station ruins, and then going past the Wilson ruins, the first major point. Do I have a point here, Jerry? I don't. Okay. Anywho, I do. Even a stick.
Is that your pointer?
Oh, okay. Okay. Plan B. Okay, if you'll have a look between about the 15-kilometre mark on the road distance along the bottom, that's the R.M. Williams Way coming in there. That's the road from Orroroo. And then at about the 25k mark is Hawker, where the road does a T-junction and continues as the Flinders Ranges Way. I've got a number of major points marked there. The maximum eclipse is actually very close to where the Bratchina Gorge Road joins. And then the eclipse centre line is actually just outside the northern boundary of the Ikara Flinders Ranges National Park. And then at about the 128k mark, we've got the entrance to Alpena. And is Paul Rogers here tonight? No? Yeah, Paul Rogers, he actually showed great foresight. He has already booked Alpena Station for us for the November 2030 eclipse. It's the longest range booking, apparently, that Alpena's ever taken. Yeah. And then about the 135k mark, that's Blinman, where you essentially do a sharp left turn and then head down Parachilna Gorge, all the way back down to the main road at Parachilna. And you'll see, you've got tens of kilometres of road there where you've got a nice long eclipse duration and you don't have to go and sit on the centre line. Leave that to the Instagram butterflies and the first timers. Spread yourselves out, guys. You'll see basically the same thing. Okay. Now, this whole method of using points to calculate an eclipse, this is actually invented by several amateur astronomers. And to be honest, I'm not sure which one of us came up with the idea first. We all seem to have had it at roughly the same time. And it's largely a result of us, we do mapping in our day jobs. Like I was doing geological maps. Michael Zeiler of GreatAmericanEclipses.com. He's actually a professional cartographer as a day job. And a few of the other guys who came up with this technique also do mapping as part of their day jobs. And after we started showing this around and asking the professional astronomers, well, look, this is interesting, what do you think? Then they started to get excited about it. Because it turns out you can actually use this to make some incredibly detailed eclipse maps and very, very accurate ones. And in particular, you can incorporate things like the corrections for the shape of the moon. The moon's very lumpy and it wobbles. And so its outline on the sky is constantly changing. And if you really want to get nitpicky about your eclipse calculations, you also need to consider your own altitude and also the sort of terrain that surrounds you. The librations are predictable, fortunately. That's the librations for the end of 2030. And actually calculating the lunar limb, though, it got so complicated, I ended up breaking it out into a second spreadsheet to do the outline. This is for the 2030 eclipse as it's crossing the Stewart Highway. And that is the black line is the actual lunar limb outline, exaggerated about 50 times. And the pink circle is, what the moon would be if it was perfectly smooth. The green line going to the left is the direction the moon is moving across the sun. And then the yellow and black lines are the north poles of the moon and the sun. So in terms of sky orientation, that drawing is nearly upside down. I should actually do another version where it's turned around to how you'd view it on the day. The other nice thing about this spreadsheet, though, is it also corrects the positions of the edges of the total solar eclipse, the north and south limits, because that really does depend on the lunar outline, especially on the north and south edges. You'll see at the top there, at about the 1 o'clock position, there's a big dent. That's actually going to make the eclipse a bit shorter than usual for the people on the north limit. And there's another big dent at about the 2:30 position. So if you're north of centre line, that's going to reduce your duration a little bit. And then at about the 8:30 position, there's a big bump. Actually, your eclipse starts a bit early if you're south of centre line. Oddly enough, with the 2030 eclipse, the maximum duration is not on the centre. It's actually about 10 kilometres south of it. We're only talking like half a second or so. But there's an elephant in the room. Delta T, as we call it. I like that symbol. Looks like it should be on the front of a robot or something, in a cartoon. But anyway, Delta T. What is it? It's the difference between terrestrial time and universal time. Terrestrial time nowadays is defined by a collective of atomic clocks, and it's assumed to be constant. When it was first invented in the late 19th century, it was based on the motions of the planets as a form of celestial clock. That's terrestrial time. There are variations on it known as terrestrial dynamic time. You can have terrestrial dynamic atomic time and other nitpicky versions where you're talking about nanoseconds in most cases. Now, whereas universal time, which is essentially the time you see on your iPhone, that's defined by the Earth's rotation. And we've known since the late 19th century at least that is variable. This is how delta T has varied during the era of scientific astronomy. Now, try and come up with an equation that fits that line and can be used to predict delta T into the future. Because it's the differences in delta T make a huge difference to how you calculate eclipses, especially in the far future. Now, the reasons for all the variations. Well, one of the big ones is the Earth's rotation is gradually slowing down due to tidal forces. Yeah, back in the day, latter days of the dinosaurs, the day was about 23 hours long. It's getting longer. So that's tidal braking. There's also other factors in play. There's a lot of mass redistribution happening on and within the Earth on multi-thousand-year timescales. Up until about 20,000 years ago, there were huge ice caps on Canada and Scandinavia and Siberia. The Northern Hemisphere ice ages. So we're talking trillions of tons of ice sitting on what was land masses. All of those ice caps have melted. That's had two effects. One is, instead of a great lump of ice sitting in the Arctic regions, that's now turned back into water and gone into the oceans and spread out all over the Earth. That has the effect of slowing the Earth's rotation down. At the same time, though, the land that was being weighed down by the ice caps is now slowly rebounding to where it used to be before there was an ice cap. That's actually drawing mass from near the equator up to the polar regions of the Earth underneath the continents. So, yeah, it's speeding the Earth up. Plus, you also have other effects like giant earthquakes and seasonal movements of ice and air and water. And we're pretty sure, look, if the Greenland and Antarctica ice caps get really serious about melting, then we're going to see some major changes in delta T in the next few hundred years. But I like to explain some of these blips due to other factors. Right, Isaac Newton died. There was one blip. The French Academy of Sciences precisely measured the Earth. Changed again. The S-bend got invented. It's 250 years since the S-bend got invented, people. This allowed you to finally have a toilet indoors and not die instantly of typhoid. Then, South Australia got born. That was when it flattened out a bit. Then the first transatlantic telegraph cable, that made it drop. We fixed that by inventing milk chocolate. But the big one, of course, South Australia adopted a half-hour time zone. Let's face it, how many times have you had to explain to interstate and international people why South Australia has a half-hour time zone? It's nuts, isn't it? Drives you mad. So, yeah, that's my explanation for the big blip. It could even be right. Oh, and incidentally, Parnell's pitch drop experiment, that's one of the longest running scientific experiments ever. You can go read about it on Wikipedia. There's even a webcam aimed at the thing if you want to watch the world's most boring live video. Yeah. And now, what's Delta T been up to in recent years? Well, we have here a graph. The blue line is what it's actually been doing. Now, the orange squares are courtesy of Fred Edistamack and John Mears. So that's Mr. Eclipse and Mr. Astronomical Calculations, respectively. And a publication they put out in 2006 called the 5 Millennium Canon of Solar Eclipses. And they came up with an equation that predicted delta T after the book was published. And you will find a lot of other eclipse-related websites will be using the 5 Millennium catalogue fairly uncritically as the basis for their own calculations. A few years later, Fred also put together a website that he called eclipsewires.com. He used to run NASA's Eclipse website before he retired too, but this was his retirement project. And he slightly altered his equation. That's the purple triangles. And yeah, for the first few years, everything was working really well. Yeah, Fred looked awesome. And then 2020 came along. Well, you know what happened in 2020. Right, I mean, that was the year I finally got to watch every single TV episode of Star Trek ever made to that point. Yeah, it was also for a lot of you, especially if you're living in suburban areas, that was the year your wheelie bin went out more than you did. Yeah, that sort of thing. Yep. So yeah, we can blame that on COVID as well. So we don't know where delta T is going to go next. We literally have no idea. Flip a coin, throw a dart at a numbered board. Yeah. I've really had to take a punt on this. I mean, back when I first did the maps for 2030, that was back during 2020. Yeah, I was using a delta T roughly in between these two lines. And then delta T changed, and I now had to completely redo all my maps and calculations starting from scratch. Would have been really annoying, except by that point I had the spreadsheet, so it's just a matter of changing one cell and then rerunning the macro. So, moving on to the first of our 5 eclipses, Thursday, the 20th of April, 2023. It only touched the Exmouth Peninsula in terms of mainland Australia, and it ran over a few offshore islands as well. This was a slightly strange eclipse, especially when it came to the issue of eye safety. I'll talk about that a bit later. But, yep, because, it's a really long drive to Western Australia, and the West Australian government were not really saying very much about preparations for visitors. A lot of us elected to get on the boat. This is a P&O's Pacific Explorer. Sadly, it's recently been sent to the scrapyard. So this is probably this would have been its last ever astronomy trip. Now, this is taken by Fred's wife, Pat Aspinack, with an iPhone. And the little dot you see above the ship's mast is the planet Venus. That was visible during totality, so was Jupiter. And this is quite a fun eclipse. I mean, literally everybody aboard was watching the total eclipse. I mean, we were seeing crew up on deck that you normally never see during a cruise. I mean, I'm talking people like the kitchen staff, the engineering crew, the people who spend their entire time down in the bowels of the ship out of sight of the general public. And they were up on deck watching it with us. It was great. I'm really glad P&O let them do that. We were at anchor, by the way. We weren't actually travelling anywhere. So, yeah, we're 6 rough-looking people who happen to bump into each other on that boat. Well, I'm the handsome guy in the middle. That's my lovely wife next to me. Yeah, well, the other 4, well, you know who they are. I noticed Kate is still wearing her Cairns t-shirt. And this is what it was like around us about 10 minutes before total eclipse. My little projector image was really, really popular. We had literally hundreds of people gathering around it, including at one point just about the entire casino security staff were out there taking pictures, most of the bar staff. We had the engineers coming up, kitchen hands, all sorts, plus lots of the passengers. And now what Paul is posing with there, that black thing, is actually a plastic spoon that I bought from my local Drake's supermarket just before we came on this trip. And there's a close-up. A $2 strainer spoon does a lovely arrayed image of a partial solar eclipse, multiple pinholes. And my main image got projected out of a 8x40 monocular. And it turns out my shadow board has a nail hole in it, made another natural pinhole. And this is what it was like about an hour after the total eclipse. Basically, everyone else had buggered off to the bars. And there's only a handful of us left on deck. And I must admit, when Paul Hasey came aboard the ship, I was hoping, he'd come along with a fabulous bit of camera gear and take some amazing pictures, but no. Paul had actually decided, no, this time he was not going to take photos of this eclipse, he was actually going to watch it. So as far as I know, this is the only picture he took with his phone. And that bright dot to the upper left of the sun is the planet Jupiter. And then the other phone shot on the right was me doing the typical first-time eclipse photographer thing of I'm holding my phone up as far as I can to get it as close as possible to this event that's happening hundreds of thousands of kilometres away. And I've got it on maximum digital zoom and I'm hand holding it. Yeah, and as you can see, it's a crap picture. You can do slightly better with a real camera on a tripod. This is my attempt. As it turned out, the inner corona on this one was quite bright because the moon and the sun were almost exactly the same size. And so I actually overexposed the innermost corona. The middle corona is about right, and then the outer corona I didn't get at all. I didn't expose for long enough, which is why most eclipse photos are done as composites. You do multiple exposures of varying durations, and one exposure is best for the innermost corona, another exposure is best for the outermost bits of corona, and then you composite them. Yeah, this is Fred Espinak's picture. He was on the boat as well. This is pretty similar to what you could actually eyeball on the day, including that bright pink prominence at about the 8 o'clock position. And I might add, the sky was actually fairly bright for this one. I mean, the moon's shadow was only 40 kilometres wide when it went over us, which is quite narrow for a total eclipse. And then we have Miroslav Drukmala, who is a professional solar scientist and obsessive solar eclipse photographer. And this was his composite. Yeah. We are talking a fantastic amount of detail there. But this is the sort of camera rig he travels around with. And just outside of that picture, there is a table absolutely covered in high-end laptops. Yeah, this guy is serious. So, and there were two other favourite photos. Michael Zeiler from GreatAmericanEclipse.com was on board, and he stuck up a big poster of his Australian eclipse maps. And then I had on board several of these T-shirts I'm wearing tonight. So there you go. And I made a point of wandering around the ship wearing one of these every day. So yeah, my back was being photographed a lot. It's all right. My wife says I look really good from behind as well. So, and for a close-up of the map, there you go. Now I might add, a map like this gets eclipse tourists really, really excited. I mean, 5 eclipses in 15 years in one country, and we are considered relatively safe for international travellers. Yes, despite, the fact that we've got, 9 out of the 10 most venomous snakes in the world, plus sharks, plus crocodiles, plus extreme heat, red gum trees that drop branches on you and kill you, jellyfish, crocodiles, drop bears, Oh, yeah, and we drive on the left. That really confuses a lot of the internationals. Anyway, so people are quite excited to see a map like this because your typical eclipse map is more like this, courtesy of XKCD. can go and look that one up if you want to go and download your own copy. I might add the cartoonist of XKCD. He used to work for NASA building Mars rovers. So yeah, he does know his science. And now we move on to Saturday, the 22nd of July, 2028, which is our next eclipse. Basically the Kimberleys through to Sydney, just missing Birdsville. Now, when this eclipse comes ashore in Western Australia, and it hits about 3 different peninsulas pretty much simultaneously at 10:48 a.m. local time, the moon's shadow has a surface speed of about 2,200 kilometres an hour. And then when it leaves the New South Wales coast at about just before 2:45 local, it's travelling at about 5,000 kilometres an hour ground speed. So this is a total eclipse where you may actually get to see the moon's shadow in motion. The shadow is about 210, 220 k's wide in the Kimberleys. Total eclipse goes for up to 5 minutes. And when it crosses Sydney, it's about just under 190 kilometres wide, and you're still over 3.5 minutes of total eclipse even through Sydney. Now, I've only just recently started working on this one, so we don't have a lot to show you on this one. But yeah, there's the times for Sydney. The big jaggedy inlet just above centreline is Sydney Harbour itself. The inlet just under centreline is Botany Bay. Wollongong is roughly at about 150 second line. And if you zoom out a bit more, total eclipse starting times, yeah, Newcastle is just outside the north edge. So we're looking at what, 6 million people right there who will see a total solar eclipse. And guess when the very next total solar eclipse anywhere in the world is? 25th November 2030 through South Australia. As I was explaining to the Tourism Commission, if even 1% of the population of Sydney decide to drive over here in 2030, we are talking about a hell of a lot of traffic. And just to show you how close the centre of the eclipse goes to Sydney, it actually passes between the airport and the city itself. And to put it in context, let's see. Yeah, Bintel's shop is also within this map. So there you go. One of Australia's largest astronomy retailers is almost exactly on centreline. And I got emailed this simulated photo from a eclipse follower in Sydney, Nick Eggleston. He actually combined his photos of the 2017 eclipse in America with the usual postcard shot of Sydney Harbour taken from the Botanic Gardens. Or as he was telling me, this is the premier New Year's Eve fireworks spot. He's correctly mapped out how the sky will appear. This eclipse actually occurs in Cancer, so there's not very many bright stars nearby, but Mercury is underneath the sun at about the 7 o'clock position. I did point out to Nick, though, and he does agree with me, there is one small problem with this view, is that's what I think it will really look like on eclipse day, being Sydney Harbour. And then we come to ours. We're just under 5 years away from this one, people. It's time to get seriously planning. Now, remember I told you about delta T? It changes. It's very hard to predict in advance. This map shows the situation near Arkaroola village. Now, that north limit, delta T at 77.6 seconds, that's the 5 millennium canon of solar eclipses prediction. The line above it is my prediction with an updated delta T. Effectively, the entire eclipse path has been shifted nearly 4 kilometres sideways. Yeah, Doug Sprigg was actually getting quite excited when I mentioned this to him. He was hoping if delta T moves a bit more, it might actually go over the village, and then he doesn't have to go anywhere to show his guests. He is actually planning a trip out to the south eastern corner of the property where the eclipse is going to last for about a minute, which is a bit of a contrast to 2002, where I think they actually had to trek out into the desert beyond Mount Hopeless. Real expedition. Yeah, but this is the level of detail we can get down to now with the raster method of calculating eclipses. And similarly, this is where the centre line goes through the Flinders Ranges. That darker green area is the national park. And if you go by the 5 millennium Canon prediction, it actually goes through the northern edge of the national park, but no, it's moved out now. It's actually going through Gum Creek Station. And if you want to know where centre line is, it's about 15-minute drive from Alpina's front gate, if that. You're about 1,200 metres from the north boundary of the national park. And just by sheer coincidence, when I stopped to take this photo, the sun was at about the same altitude as it will be on eclipse day. Of course, taken at a different time of year, the shadows are pointing a different way. And if you don't want to drive quite that far, if you want to hang around in the town, well, Hawker gets just over a minute. If you want to get the absolute maximum in the Flinders Ranges, well, actually the Bratchina Gorge Road intersection is very close to the maximum eclipse and about 10k south of the centre line, driving distance. And as you can see, not many obstructions, which is important if you're going to watch it from the Flinders Ranges, because Wilpena Pound Visitor Centre, it's well inside the path, but there's a mountain in the way. There's also a lot of trees in the way. If you go for a 10-minute walk back up the access road, heading east, you will actually get to see this eclipse. If you go for a 5-minute drive back out to the main road, you'll get to see the eclipse much better and directly over Wilpena Pound. And if you go to some of the other lookout places, you can get good views. The top view is from Rawnsley Park's Station Hill lookout. You get a nice view of the eclipse over the Elder Range. And the bottom is from Stokes Hill lookout, which most of you have probably driven to. And that'll give you a nice view of the eclipse over Wilpena Pound. Personally, my money is on Huck's lookout, because that's a bit closer to the pound and also gets the eclipse in the same field of view. I suspect that's where all the TV cameras will turn up. But if you want to go out west of the ranges, well, it's pretty easy. If you're on the Bratchina Gorge Road, you've got a chance to get a shot of the total eclipse next to a dead tree, a bit like Jerry's photo from 2002. You don't want to get your car dirty, you can stay on the Bitumen Road, the Outback Highway. You get an unobstructed view. Or if you want to go east of the ranges, near Wirialpa, that intersection is less than 1 kilometre from centre line. And again, no obstructions apart from saltbush. And moving further west on the Stewart Highway, there's lots of places in between the Mulga where you'll get clear views off to the west-southwest. And if you're in the Gawler Ranges, top image is the intersection of 3 roads, and it's less than 1 kilometre from centre line. And the biggest thing you've got to look over is a saltbush. And the bottom picture is actually the Gawler Ranges National Park headquarters, also well inside the path. And Parks SA were quite excited to when I told them that. And if you want to go look around the towns on the Air Highway, well, one of the things the Air Highway one of the things the Air Peninsula does a lot better than Kangaroo Island, in my opinion, is weirdly shaped granite rocks. Yeah, Chakuldu Hill is one of many. And unfortunately, the Ceduna radio telescope is not inside the path of totality, but well worth a detour if you happen to be out there. And then that's the view from Poochera. The Air Highway itself is covered in trees on both sides, but there's lots of side roads which are mostly clear. And if you want to go onto the Flinders Highway nearer the west coast, there's plenty of spots there you can get a good view. And if you want to go to the maximum duration of the eclipse within Australia, Scale Bay is your spot. Although it doesn't have a very big car park. But there's lots of other places along the west coast where you can get a spectacular view. Just be aware though, people, a lot of places along the coast itself, you are standing on top of a cliff and it is crumbly. And there are quite a number of memorials in various places where people have fallen to their death after they've slipped or the cliff has collapsed underneath them. So do be careful. And one thing you're probably not going to see, though, is the moon's shadow moving towards you because it is simply too fast. This is the outline of the moon's shadow when it finally comes fully onto the Australian mainland. Couple of points to note. Yes, it's actually stretching out. The front edge is going a lot faster than the back edge. It is moving very, very fast because it's only about 12 degrees above the horizon. And you'll notice that it is not an ellipse. This is one of the interesting outcomes from the whole raster method of mapping eclipses. You know, the moon's shadow is actually a polygon. It's not round. And it's messed up even more, particularly that leading edge on the east side where it's running over all the ridges in the Flinders Ranges. So yeah, the moon's shadow is not round. Now, and the other two eclipses, I have to confess I haven't done a great deal on either of these yet. That's 2037 and 2038. And you notice 2038 actually is very conveniently positioned for us. I mean, what's that for most of us? What, 2-3 hour drive from home? You've probably got relatives living in those path of totality already. If you haven't, people, some long-range real estate planning, you know, go and find a property out there that's going cheap, buy it, then wait until 2038 and rent it out to eclipse tourists as a camping spot. So there's your retirement plan. And we do have 11 total solar eclipses in Australia during the 21st century. We also get to share 4 of them with New Zealand. There were only 5 total solar eclipses through the whole 20th century in Australia. We also get some annular eclipses, not as many. And I might add the one that's going underneath Tasmania in 2035. Well, that part of the Tasmanian coast is called Storm Bay for a reason. It's very rough. I mean, if I'm going to look at that one, personally, I'd be going to New Zealand. Much less likely to get seasick. And here's all the total and annular eclipses in South Australia during the 21st century, although 2037 only just gets in on a technicality. It's about 900 metres inside the northwest corner of South Australia on current calculation. And it's also on Aboriginal land. You'll need a permit to go out there. Yeah, personally, I'd go somewhere else to look at that one. And now, in terms of capital cities, you can be waiting quite a long time. Brisbane actually had a total eclipse in 1831, which was just a few years after it was founded as a penal colony. I can't find any records of an observation of it, though. All right. Sydney had one in 1857, and it was totally overcast. Yeah, Hobart had one in 1910. It was raining. Yeah, contemporary newspaper reports are quite good for this. And as you can see, some very long intervals, some very, very long intervals. But Adelaide, we are currently in the middle of a 500-year eclipse drought. We're only ever going to see partial eclipses. The last total solar eclipse over Adelaide's location was in 1802. The next one, maybe, is on the 21st of January 2987. It starts at sunrise in Mount Barker, plus or minus about 200 kilometres either way, east and west, depending on delta T. The soonest definite total solar eclipse in Victoria Square is going to be in the 41st century. Yeah, it's an enormous interval of time. And just out of interest, these are the eclipse paths in 1802 and 1916, which were Adelaide's last eclipses. Now, in 1802, Matthew Flinders and his crew on the Investigator were busy mapping Spencer Gulf. Nicholas Bodan, I think, was still down on the coast of Victoria. They wouldn't meet each other until a month afterwards in Encounter Bay. And so there are no scientific records of this eclipse, although there are stories among the Ngarrindjeri people of the eclipse. And incidentally, the Ngarrindjeri actually have quite an interesting interpretation of what the sun and the moon actually represent. But go and talk to one of their elders about it. And the other map is the 1916 annular eclipse, which, as you can see, included Adelaide and Victor and a few other sunny places. Just barely touched Melbourne as well. So, but again, if you're predicting eclipses into the far future, remember the elephant. Delta T, we have no idea. So why did I begin this project? Well, started with a mate of mine. We watched the 2002 eclipse together. He moved to the UK. And then he sends me an email with this map in it and the subject line of, "You lucky, lucky bastard." And then with a zoomed in picture of that with the dates. 5 total eclipses across Australia in 15 years. Yes, you lucky, lucky bastard. Unfortunately, he's deceased now, so I can't tell him how lucky I was. Heart attack. Anyway. Now, so yeah, 5 total solar eclipses in 15 years in Australia, and I can drive from home to 2 of them in a day trip. I mean, that is freaking awesome. Think back to that XKCD cartoon. Most eclipses are in terrible places. And here's a comparison of these eclipses I can go to. Now, back in 2002, I had to drive all the way out to Lyndhurst for 27 seconds. You know, in 2030, I'll get nearly 2 minutes, and it's a lot closer. And then in 2038, well, you know, I get almost 2 minutes. Again, within driving distance. I mean, I'm just looking at 2038 map there. I mean, how close does that get to Stockport? Not that far away, actually. There's possibilities here, Gerhard. Does the society want to do something? Put Stockport Observatory on a semi and, hey? Well, that's all right. You know, jack up the buildings, put them on a low loader and... Okay. So, in terms of a total eclipse timeline, we had 2023. Then last year there was an eclipse through Mexico and the United States and Canada. Now, there's an eclipse next year, goes across the Arctic Ocean, runs down the eastern coast of Greenland, over the western end of Iceland, ends up in northern Spain. Yeah, very strange track, that one. In 2027, well, it goes across the whole bunch of places which mostly have travel advisories on them at the moment, apart from the Morocco and Gibraltar and Spain. And then we got our big one in 2028, Kimberley to Sydney. Also runs over Cocos and Christmas Islands. And New Zealand, just missing Birdsville. Then we got ours in South Australia, which also crosses Southern Africa, or as I was explaining to a Tourism Commission meeting, well, the choice for the international tourists is, you know, lions or kangaroos. Yeah. Let's face it, you know, if they're really keen to see lions as well, they can go to Monarto or, you know, Werribee or the other open range zoos here. Right. After 2030, the next one's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I think it does run over 1 or 2 tiny islands, but I'll have to check. 2033, well, it's the Bering Strait and the coasts on both sides. And to be honest, neither of those countries really appeals to me right now. And 2034, again, most of the places it goes through currently have travel advisories. 2035, well, China or Japan are a possibility. And then we've got 2037, which is Geraldton to the Gold Coast via Uluru. And just missing Birdsville again. Also just misses Alice Springs, but does get Alice Springs Airport. Go figure. And then in 2038, Onslow, which just missed out in 23, Onslow finally gets a total eclipse, runs across the Pilbara, and then it goes over the Gawler Ranges, right over Whyalla, and then our mid-north Riverland, and then along the Murray River. And then after that, you've got to go to Central Africa in 2041. And if you want another one in Australia, well, tell your grandkids about it because it's 2066 over Margaret River. So there I am thinking about, how do I go and see all 5 of these eclipses? Because it is literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And then, because I was running a tourism business a few years ago, I was sitting there at the annual tourism conference listening to a presentation from the government about their plans for the next 10, 15 years for tourism in this state, Vision 2030 or something like that. And they were talking about stuff like extra international aeroplane flights and making the Adelaide Festival even bigger than it is now, plus motor car races, plus the Live Golf, plus the AFL gather rounds and various international conferences that they'd try and attract to South Australia. All sounded wonderful, but then the presenter invited questions, and that was when I asked this one. Has the government made any plans yet for the total solar eclipse here in 2030? And the short answer was, well, no, we haven't because we didn't know about it. I said, well, guys, now you do. And just as a reminder, these things do attract big crowds. There was at least 15,000 people at Ceduna back in 2002, plus about another 15,000, 16,000 at Lyndhurst. There was about 60,000 eclipse tourists in far north Queensland in 2012. I'm not sure how many people got to Exmouth in 2023, but I mean, there was 2,100 just on our ship. There was another ship near ours. There was a very large crowd on shore. And this is despite the fact that the West Australian Department of Health is actually telling people not to look at the eclipse. I'll have more to say about that later. And so, it's kind of snowballed from there. So far, I've done presentations for the Tourism Industry Council, the Commission, Parks SA, a lot of local government authorities, tourism boards, and the list goes on. And this has now basically become my retirement project, is about these eclipses. And I have to admit to a real sense of deja vu, because I was also seconded to do this back in 2002 by a state government task force who was organising for that eclipse. Yeah, I was a handsome fellow then, wasn't I? Look at that. Much less grey hair and eclipse glasses. And that brings me on to eye safety. Look, people, there's no need to be a scaredy cat. You don't have to hide from eclipse anymore. There are lots of safe ways to look at them. ASA had a double-sided brochure even back in 2002 that described how to look at an eclipse safely. I've got copies here if you want them. We got things like eclipse shades and eclipse viewers. I've got samples of those here if you want to look at them afterwards. There is also an international standard for these things nowadays and an Australian standard. Yes, standard 12312 Part 2 of 2020, which is pretty much a word-for-word copy of the international standard 12312 Part 2 of 2015, just with an Australian standard logo on it. Badge engineering at its finest. I hope that will finally put to bed a complaint from 2002, which I heard a lot of from the State Health Department in those days, was, eclipse glasses are dangerous because there's no Australian standard for them. Well, now we have an Australian standard, so let's squash that one. I wonder what they might come up with next. Despite the fact we had an Australian standard, the West Australian Department of Health in 2023 said it was dangerous to look at an eclipse at any time, even with protection. Yeah, we really went backwards on the safety measures there, guys. So the glasses, you wear them like regular glasses. The viewers, you just hold them in front of your eyes. If you're wearing glasses, personally, I prefer the viewers, because you find the eclipse glasses are a bit hard to go on over your regulars. And then you can use solar film to protect cameras and so forth. Or, check if they already sell a solar filter for your telescope. Now, in terms of eye safety, Back in 2017, there was a total solar eclipse went across the United States. It's estimated that at least 150 million people went to see it. 150 million people. And that was even with the US interstate highway system. There were traffic jams that lasted, 12, 14 hours before and after. Now, the American Astronomical Society and NASA and a bunch of other scientific bodies put in an enormous effort afterwards to try and uncover any cases of eclipse eye injury. Yeah. And this is essentially notifying every medical practitioner, optometrist, medical clinic, hospital, emergency department in the United States. They uncovered about 100 cases. An awful lot of them were young adult males. You see a pattern here? Young adult males, they tend to be overrepresented in a lot of things like this. They were unable to confirm any reports of people suffering an eye injury from using certified eclipse filters. The vast majority of injuries resulted from people trying to look at the eclipse with regular sunglasses, which are not designed for it, or with no protection whatsoever, or with counterfeit eclipse filters. And that is a big problem. Don't ever buy your solar eclipse filters from online marketplaces. And don't ever buy it from, the number one search on Google. And definitely not from whatever comes up with an AI summary. AI, automated idiocy. Yes. This is where I think the West Australian Department of Health really fell down in their duty of care, quite frankly. I think what you should do here, people, and this includes the society, is you should tell people, yes, there is an international safety standard for these products, and point them to reputable suppliers. That's usually the manufacturers directly, or to their distributors within Australia. And if you happen to be running an eclipse-related event, like P&O Cruises did for 2023, well, you give everybody an eclipse filter. I mean, we had them in our boarding packages. And then they were also handing them out to the crew. Yeah, everybody had eye protection. And another thing too, in terms of certifications and so forth, although NASA has been doing an enormous amount of promotion of eclipses and public information, and I'm hoping that continues despite the continuing stupidification of the current United States government, NASA does not certify eclipse filters. So if you see someone claiming NASA certification of their eclipse filter, that is a huge red flag. Incidentally, I have a pair here of fake eclipse glasses to show anyone who's interested. My sister bought them in Carnarvon on her way to the eclipse. She only used them on her mobile phone because she had a proper set for herself and my brother-in-law. And yes, correctly using a certified solar filter product is so simple, even little kids can do it. Now, the young lad on the left, he was actually near us on the boat. He was quite proud of his eclipse mask. He was 3.5. Yeah. That was quite important. That's his dad standing behind him, by the way. Yep. Dad did the eyes, but he did everything else. And yeah, Dad tells me he's a big fan of Bruce the Shark in Finding Nemo. Yes, but it was quite an effective filter and ideal for a little kid. Unfortunately, President 2-year-old hasn't figured out how to use them. Although I notice Mrs. Trump knows, she's wearing a pair of, $20,000 sunglasses, but knows that they're no good for looking at eclipses. Now, if you want to check your filter, you can use various bright domestic light sources to check them for scratches and holes and other imperfections. And when you do actually happen to be at the moment of total solar eclipse, take your filter off. Otherwise, you won't see anything at all. You know, the brightest part of the sun's corona is about the same surface brightness as a full moon. I mean, you can stare at that for hours. And then it fades outwards. And even if you have, you know, 100th% of the sun's disk visible, that's still about 1,000 times brighter than everything else you're going to see. That's why even with a beaded solar eclipse, you're not going to see much of the corona at all. And yeah, solar eclipses do happen on other planets. Those 3 images in the top are taken by one of the Mars rovers. I forget which one, but it shows Phobos, innermost moon of Mars, crossing the sun. And then, of course, you're probably pretty familiar with Jupiter's 4 largest moons. They're casting shadows on Jupiter pretty frequently. Most of you have probably seen that in your own telescopes. And I believe we're just finishing an eclipse season on Saturn. When Saturn's rings go edge onto the sun, it also means that a lot of its moons are casting shadows on Saturn as a solar eclipse. Unfortunately, I think we're just finishing that. And so, thus ends this presentation. Yeah. Does Jerry want to move right into the annual general meeting, or we go for questions?
A couple of quick questions. Any quick questions from the audience? I'll put some lights on, actually. Right.
Just a point on safety. This nearly caught me out at Seduna. At the end of totality, you got to watch out because it can get you so fast as the sun can appear. I know you've pointed it out with one of your instruction sheets, but I think it's something that point should be made on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's what we tell people on the day is, as soon as the sun reappears, put your filters back on. I mean, you'll have no difficulty recognising when the sun reappears because it is incredibly bright compared to what you see at totality. And if you get your filters on quickly, or you just simply turn your head away, that works. I mean, this is no difference from getting a glimpse of a low sun when you're driving. Yeah.
Right. Perhaps one more question. I'm sure Fraser will be able to answer questions from the seated audience coffee afterwards. Any other quick questions? Otherwise, we'll move straight to the AGM or to some announcements and the AGM. Yeah. Look, those of you in the audience who know Fraser know that he always appears everywhere in shorts. And I've been observing with him on nights of sub-zero conditions, and yet he still wears shorts in those stargazing sessions. I don't know how he does it, but I personally look for some relief during the evening with some red wine to warm me up. So, as is customary, I offer this to Fraser to keep him warm on those cold winter nights. So, ladies and gentlemen, can we please thank Fraser for his presentation. So following that presentation, you can see why
Fraser... And it's called The Dark Side of the Moon. Very appropriate. Thank you.
And we hope that this has been recorded successfully, so you may also be able to see it afterwards on our YouTube channel. Now, Paul Martinitis is also on our YouTube channel and presents the sky this month. He's told me that in a week or so he'll have the latest video for December, January ready for viewing on our YouTube channel, which is Astronomy YouTube/Astronomy SA. Couple of presentations to make. I don't see Hans Nodke here. Hands up if you are here, Hans. No, I don't. So that's one presentation out of the way. And I had a presentation to make to Gerard O'Bourne from our awards night, and he's not here either, so we'll have to work out something there. That was Gerard's photo for which he was commended at our awards. But activities and events for December, Astro Imaging SIG meetings come and gone, ASA at Home coming up 2 Fridays' time. Member viewing nights, 13th and 20th. Keep an eye on ASA Chat for any late breaking news such as weather-related cancellations. A public viewing night is planned for Hawthorn Dean Oval, 19th of December. Watch for our website and ticketing details there if you have friends who you can entice to come along to that. Public Star Party, next chance in February. We have information sheets and merchandise available at the back of the hall. And in particular, I'll hold up this volume of the Astronomical Yearbook 2025 from the Astronomical Society of Victoria. ASA is buying 20 copies of this. It hasn't arrived yet, but through our merchandising channel, it should be available at a reasonable price plus postage. Unfortunately, not here tonight for pickup. But this volume is probably one of the closest replacements you can get for the Australia 2025 astronomy publication, which is now no longer being produced. The guys have produced about 30 years of it, and they've had enough, and they've put up their shingle and let everyone know. So people will be looking for alternatives. I've pre-ordered a volume of that myself. So we have 19 further copies to sell. Please let merchandising know if you're interested. I'll have that copy at the back over coffee if you want to look through it. Don't forget our sponsor, Adelaide Optical. Mention you're from ASA for a discount. And of course, always worth joining ASA for its activities, which include nights, member nights at Stockport and other places. Members there using their red lights for viewing and astrophotography. Dark sky camps are a real treat. I try and make as many as I can. That's the scene of Alpana, telescope setups and camping area. And similarly, Bendelby Ranges has an extensive camping area as well. And both have shearers' quarters for accommodation. So in particular, you can keep up with things in ASA via Facebook, Astronomy SA, and YouTube, Astronomy SA, with video of tonight's proceedings, hopefully also on that YouTube channel before too long. So I'll pause the proceedings and move to our annual general meeting. And it's important that Steve is still with us in the top right-hand corner of your views because he's our treasurer and he'll have a few things to say a little later. Thanks, Steve. Good to see you can still hear us. Firstly, the minutes of the last AGM, December 2024, have been circulated to members through MailChimp, I believe. I trust you've all had a chance to read it. Are there any comments about the minutes? If not, I will look for a motion of acceptance of those minutes as a true and correct record of the last AGM. Do I see a mover? Mover from the audience here, please. Someone move. Thank you, John Hisco. Move John Hisco. Seconded someone, please, from the audience. Marie Wills, seconded. Thank you. No further discussion. I put the motion that we accept the minutes of 2024 AGM as a true and correct record. All those in favour here, raise your hands. Now, just looking around the room, that looks in exceedance of a quorum of members. And I should have said, visitors, please don't raise your hands because you're not entitled to vote. But having seen only 2 visitors earlier, I think we're safe there. Thank you. Reports. Fairly quickly through secretary. We had no secretary fill the official position, so there's no official report. But it's good to see our assistant secretary, Ian Furness, step up to become secretary next year. So while he managed to keep the boat afloat, I think it's probably too much to ask for a report as well, since we don't have any official secretary and an official officer role for the society, but following tonight, we will. Membership officers report appeared in the bulletin. I won't go through it here blow by blow, but in terms of the numbers, total membership 707 was down from last year, but new members joining is at that stage is greater than last year. So conflicting signals there, but we hope we're turning a corner. We have one school member, and for new members, we're planning a specific event for new members in April 2026. So keep an eye on the news bulletins as new members. And for all members existing, please renew early and continue to enjoy the benefits of membership. Now I turn to the Treasurer's report. Stephen is joining us from Kangaroo Island, where he lives. Just before Stephen starts, I have two slides of his figures here to go through, which hopefully helps Stephen say a few words.
So, you can hear me?
Indeed.
Okay. Profit and loss, firstly, is that revenues were up on the previous year. The bottom line was also up. Probably the main change is that when I took over this role of treasurer, with the board's help and with a lot of stuffing around with Bank SA, we moved most of the funds sitting in the savings account to a term deposit. And just looking at the current month, we've received interest of over $500, whereas if we'd left them in the saver, that would have been about $1.50. So just that move of funds has benefited the society a few $1,000s over the course of the financial year. Other than that, the balance sheet, I increased the value on the balance sheet of the land at Stockport to line it up with the current rate value. It was 100,000. We increased it to 150,000. We're also looking at how we can value, or firstly track and then value all the assets that are held at Stockport, because there's all sorts of things, and it's quite difficult to actually put a value on them. Based on trying to replace them, or if they get destroyed in a fire, so we're working on that aspect of it. But otherwise, it's all pretty straightforward. No issues, no hidden costs or liabilities. Insurance was the same as the previous year. That's about it. Unless anybody's got any questions.
Any questions? I can't see any out there. I also put the auditor's report there to say that we've been given the official tick that everything's correct and above board. Unfortunately, Averell Kessling will be hanging up his shingle, so one of the jobs for council next year will be to find a new auditor, hopefully at the same price as Averell has done for us, which was basically a free service, I understand.
Yeah.
So thank you, Stephen.
No worries.
I'll move a motion. I'll be looking for a motion that all reports be accepted at the end of this session, but I'll also mention my report. It's a one-pager which you can read in the bulletin, and hopefully some of you have. Personal highlights for me, obviously your members doing great work across our various fields and our outreach as well. Some of the challenges we face going into the year ahead, our website and member database is a mess, and we really need to migrate to a new platform, and that'll be a key issue for us in council to have that happen. Live streaming's been hit and miss lately, including tonight. Sorry, Colin, didn't do yours properly, but this seems to be working. So hopefully it's in place for 2026. Facilities at Stockport, Bird infestation remains a potential problem, but we've made some good progress there in recent months, and the place looks fairly clean. Also need to look at the long-term future, including light pollution at Stockport and what our members want in terms of dark sky viewing. Also working on a constitution update, and of course volunteers are always welcome. So given you've seen the official reports from Membership Officer and myself in the bulletin, and you've just heard Stephen's report, do I see a motion of acceptance of all those reports from the meeting? Thank you. Moved Nathaniel. Seconded? Seconded Lynn Greeder. Thank you. I don't see any questions arising on any of those reports, so I put the motion of acceptance of all those reports. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Again, that looks pretty unanimous. I assume that those who didn't raise their hands are visitors, which were small in number anyway. So, yeah, incoming council. You can see all the names there. In particular, noting the changes in bright yellow. Ian Furness is moving up to full secretary. As I mentioned earlier, that position was officially vacant for the last 2 years since Lisa hung up her shingle there. Communications officer will be Mary Martinaitis, replacing Joe Greeder from this year. And bulletin officer Jared Rueff will be replacing Marie Wills of 3 years service. Marie in particular, I think, will still be continuing in various background roles, but certainly Marie's done a great job there, keeping us honest with getting bulletin articles in time. General councillors are full at the moment, and Ian Furness was a councillor moving to an officer role as secretary, and Rosemary Prentice nominated for general councillor, so she'll be joining us in 2026. Other than the names I've mentioned, all the rest of us continue. So in terms of incoming council, they're the new ones, and outgoings, we really don't have too many. I can also say that management roles in ASA, as appointed by council, are many and various. There's about 30 roles there with about 30 odd names, 30 names beside them, people in doing multiple things in some cases. But you can see a couple of red bits where situations vacant, could be filled by volunteers. So there's a lot of people doing a lot of things in the background to keep this society going. We'd always do with more help. So a particular thanks to outgoing councillors for their work in 2025, and role managers particularly who don't otherwise get a mention. We will be reviewing our role managers in the new year with the new council, and just making sure they're willing to go ahead. Our next council meeting is 10th of December, a special one, specifically to look at the calendar for the year ahead. I need to thank all outgoing councillors and role managers, and also our sponsors and all attendees at this AGM. So at this stage, having done our business, I can offer you my season's greetings for the year ahead, and see you all in 2026. Thanks to our helpers tonight, tea and coffee at the back. And thank you all for joining us this evening. Good night. Season's greetings.
Good night.